Let's dive into a very strange, very modern public health crisis. This one isn't spread by a virus, but by something much closer to home: our obsession with achievement. Welcome to our diagnostic guide to the award epidemic. So, a new hospital ward has opened its doors. But as you can see from its mission directive, this is not your typical medical facility. They're not here for broken bones. They're here to treat broken expectations, to handle the casualties of our hyper-competitive culture. We're talking about the almost elite, the runners-up, the ones left gasping when their name isn't called. Okay, here's how we're going to break it all down. First, we'll define this so-called epidemic. Then we'll get into the official diagnosis. We'll take a tour of the specialized ward, check out its, let's say, unique treatment plan. And then we'll connect all this satire to the very real costs and figure out if there's a cure. Right, let's get into the pathology. What exactly is this award epidemic? Well, at its core, it's a crisis of ambition. It's fueled by a culture that seems to hand out trophies for, well, everything. And in the process, it leaves behind this trail of emotional wreckage for all the people who almost win. And this chart, wow, it just illustrates the journey perfectly. Just look at it. Hope builds and builds, hitting this dizzying peak right at the moment of nomination. But for most people, right after the announcement, it is a sheer vertical drop into what clinicians are now calling the hope abandoned zone. This isn't just disappointment, it's a severe chronic stressor. And that, right there, is the trigger for our epidemic. So, how do you formally diagnose something like this? Well, with so many new patients flooding in, the medical community actually had to coin a new, very official-sounding term for the condition. And here it is, post-award announcement syndrome, or PAAS for short. The definition is so clinically precise, you've got to appreciate it. It's a psychosomatic condition triggered by that very specific, soul-crushing phrase, and the winner is someone else. It's that exact moment where hope curdles into a medical event. Now check out this patient chart. The number one physical symptom is what doctors are calling the gasp reflex. It's that sharp, involuntary intake of breath, that sound, immediately followed by a hollow, forced little laugh. You know the one. It's a desperate attempt to look like a good sport. You can even see the waveform here. Pure shock, then a sad attempt at recovery. Oh, but it doesn't stop there. The secondary symptoms are just as revealing. You've got achievement withdrawal, which is basically a state of deep despair. Delusional retrospection, where patients just obsess over tiny things they could have done differently. And then there are even physical signs, like award envy rashes and clasping tremors, where the patient's hands mimic holding a trophy that they'll never get. And the onset is brutally fast. This statistic is staggering. 90% of admissions happen within just 24 hours of that trigger. It could be a runner-up email or maybe just seeing the winner's victory lap all over LinkedIn. The system is just completely overwhelmed. Which, of course, brings us to the facility built to handle all this. Let's take a look inside the specialized unit designed for this unprecedented crisis, the HA ward. That's HA as in hope abandoned. Although, as this little administrative note shows, bureaucracy has its own special logic. See, while the doctors called it the HA ward, the accounting department mandated it be called the ZA ward. And why? Because it was the 677th column, the very next one available in their master spreadsheet. I guess in a strained system, efficiency is healing. Now let's meet some of the patients. This is Rohan. He's suffering from what the chart calls acute recognition deficiency. His biggest complaint is a classic case of delusional retrospection. But my PowerPoint had animations. For him, the injustice is so personal, and that laminated certificate of participation is his only comfort. And over here, we have Anika, a young innovator. She missed out on her big award by a fraction of a point. Her diagnosis? High resistance to mediocrity. As her doctor tries to reframe her result as just statistically average, she's already plotting how to get the whole thing reevaluated. So you might be asking, how in the world do you treat a ward full of people like Rohan and Annika? Well, the protocols are, shall we say, unconventional. Let's take a look at the official treatment plan for the almost winners. The 4-step protocol is a masterclass in institutional absurdity. First up, the pharmaceutical approach. They administer Validol, get it, Validol, which is just a placebo. Then, physical therapy. Patients get to scream into pillows labeled Oscar or Noble. That's followed by a psychological intervention with a very solemn sympathy trophy ceremony. And finally, group therapy, where they all rehearse fake acceptance speeches for future losses.
But of course, recovery comes at a cost. The final invoice itemizes everything: the bed rest, the laminated certificate, and notice there's an extra charge because tears ruin standard paper, and a pretty hefty emotional surcharge. The grand total? Your self-worth. And that's the satirical punchline that hits just a little too close to home.
And that right there is our pivot point. Because for all the absurdity, the Haw Ward feels uncomfortably familiar, doesn't it? So let's strip away the satire for a moment and look at the very real crisis of ambition that inspired it. What we're really talking about here is the urban ambition crisis. Sure, it's a global thing, driven by hustle culture everywhere, but it has this unique local flavor, right? It's intensified by the crushing pressure of high-stakes competitive exams and the immense weight of family expectations and sacrifices. In this environment, prestige often feels like a non-negotiable currency. And this is where it stops being funny. The collateral damage is devastatingly real. Take this story. An advocate failed his judiciary exams and completely spiraled into a 2-year major depressive episode. The ripple effect was huge. His spouse, a police officer, was left to bear all of the invisible labor, the financial strain, the emotional anchoring, trying to raise kids in a house filled with silence. It's a powerful look at the fragility of ambition versus the quiet strength of those who hold families together. And this crisis isn't happening in a vacuum. This chart compares how it shows up around the world. In the West, hustle culture might lead to a classic midlife crisis. In East Asia, they have exam hell, which leads to academic burnout. But the local flavor here often combines all of them. You get the mid-career identity crisis, the drained family savings, and the profound instability of a highly educated gig economy. It's a global problem with intensely local triggers. So, after diagnosing this problem both satirically and in the real world, what's the actual protocol for recovery? Is there a way to break this cycle? This quote from the ward's lead physician, Dr. Mehta, really captures the core dilemma perfectly. The HA ward is just a Band-Aid because the world outside keeps manufacturing the disease. As long as that trophy machine is running, there will always be a new patient left gasping that hollow ha of disappointment. But there are real, evidence-based strategies to build resilience. First, try building a failure resume, literally a list of your rejections and near misses. It helps you see them not as defeats, but as data points for growth. Second, diversify your identity. You are not just your job title. You're a gardener, a friend, a learner. And third, avoid toxic positivity. It is okay to acknowledge that disappointment hurts. You don't always have to just try harder. And yet, the system just keeps on going. As one patient is discharged, another is already being logged into that spreadsheet. The line is long. And it leaves us with a final, kind of chilling question to think about. In this endless cycle of ambition and validation, are we the patient, the doctor, or maybe just the accountant filling in the next empty row?